and welcome to episode 2 of the Brood Sages. We are your hosts, Freeloader and Sabaiku. Sabaiku, how are you?
Fantastic. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing fantastic as well. I've got to say that week 1, in between episode 1 and episode 2 of the Brood Sages, has been fantastic. We're on Apple Podcasts, we're on Google Play, we're on TuneIn, we're on Amazon. It's been a really remarkable week for us. On top of that, we've had, I would have to say, probably somewhere on the order of twice to 3 times as many people downloading and listening to the podcast as I ever possibly dreamed could happen in the first week. So I'm very excited. I'm glad that there's a community out there that would like to hear this kind of content. But aside from that, the week has been, notable. There's certainly news that we'll get to in just a minute. But personally, my week has been, well, not a lot of laddering. I'm 1-0 on ladder. But the brawl has been a lot of fun. The rat brawl is what just finished up, and I was able to get to the fusion stones with 1 loss. That 1 loss being against a level 20. So I don't feel bad about it. But aside from that, the games went fairly smooth. It turns out Hysteria was a fantastic include, especially after the buff that happened to it. And again, we'll get to that in a little bit. But suffice to say,
Especially with a lot of the cheap rodents not moving.
exactly. So many of my opponent's openers were non-moving 6, 7, or unfortunately every once in a while an 8 health, which my Hysteria didn't activate. But when it was a 6 or a 7, I could just drop 3 mana in response and smack them in the face with their own unit, and we could effectively restart the game just with them being at a lower life total than me, which always felt pretty good. This brawl, I would say, was give or take on average about, I'm going to say it was on the easier end of the brawls that we've experienced so far. It was not a hard march up to the 10 fusion stones. I felt like it was pretty inevitable I was going to get there. And how about you?
I also had no trouble getting to the fusion stones. I got there this morning with 0 losses, actually, which
Ooh.
felt great. The rodents really play into the push-pull mechanic of Ironclad, which is always a lot of fun to use and can often really reward some smart play when you're able to set up your wind makers so that they remove an enemy unit and hit the base, or remove 2 enemy units. That really makes the game a lot smoother and a lot more interesting.
I had an ozone purifier into Hysteria lethal for my second to the last win.
So good.
Oh my gosh. Well, what made it even better was the fact that I had to use Windmakers to extend my front so that I could get my ozone purifiers in front of the correct minion. The problem was, in order to do that, the only lane I had, my Windmakers had to go through a Project Phoenix that then died and respawned. And there was a 1 in 3 chance it was going to respawn into the exact cell that I wanted to use the ozone purifiers for. If that happened, the Project Phoenix was an 8 health, so that wouldn't have worked out. My Hysteria wouldn't activate on it.
Gotcha.
So it was a 1 in 3 to lose the game. It didn't spawn there, thank goodness, but now it spawned to one of the 2 sides. So when I had to play Hysteria, it was still a 50-50 to lose the game. And I won that one. It was just like, the win of coin flips again and again and again. It felt so good when it happened, for sure.
Sometimes you get rewarded for playing well and taking that chance. That's actually another reason why this brawl is fun, because it rewards strong early play, which you can then take advantage of with big chunk damage, either through the Windmakers rushing in for 5 or Chaotic Pupil hitting 10. And once you get that 10 chunk damage, you can usually finish off with chip from something like Overchargers or Booming Professors if those are in your deck.
Yeah, I actually found Saberpaws to be the MVP of this brawl, even though they were not anywhere near strong enough to really compete against any of the other 2 drops that were rats. The fact that they had 2 movement and allowed you to respond to your opponent's opener of, let's say, Sound Drivers. They drop an 8-0 on turn 1. But you could respond with Saberpaws into Ozone Purifier, for example. And you could make a board that both had a lot of health, but also was split across 2 units, which made it very difficult for them to clear the following turn.
Especially when you're trying to play a rush style deck, it really makes a big difference to set up that strong early game that maintains your front and allows you to get that damage in.
I mean, not for nothing, but because of the way the matchmaking works in Brawl, I'm always playing some sort of a more aggressive rush deck. I don't ever feel in Brawl like I have the luxury of letting the game go long. I've got to try to win it before my opponent can. But for the most part, I would say that each Brawl that has happened so far, aside from one or two, have lent themselves fairly well to just playing better as a rush style player. If you can, you can get to the 10 fusion stones pretty much with, I would say, level and a half less cards than your opponent.
Especially if you're taking advantage of whatever synergy is available in the brawl.
Mm-hmm.
And you play with that well. It does require you to spread out your upgrades across more different cards and different decks that you would not normally play. So you can't just focus all of your upgrades into one area, but it's worth it, I think, to help get a more robust library.
Oh, for sure. There are definitely times where I will choose to upgrade a card because I'm putting it into my Brawl deck for the week.
Absolutely.
You don't feel too bad about it because you know it's going to make the climb a little easier through Brawl, and on top of that, it's going to make getting the rewards a little easier. So you kind of feel like it's an investment right now that within the week will pay off dividends.
As you pay gold for matches, you can usually reap the benefit within the first few matches.
Overall, how do you feel about Brawl?
I love it for a few reasons. The first reason is just the different game mechanic. They allow a different style of play than you get on ladder. You get to play the game in a totally new way because cards that you wouldn't normally play have extra movement or extra strength or cost less, and that tends to make the games shorter, which is appreciated, and they make the games a little more interesting. So you're my second point. You're playing with cards you don't normally play with. When you're trying to ladder in Platinum and Diamond, most of the time you're stuck with your one or two strongest deck. And if you want to mess around with that deck that has all level 3 cards, you don't really get the opportunity. But Brawl lets you play with those cards and play with those mechanics that you aren't normally experimenting with.
Yeah, and
On top of that, the third reason why I like the Brawl, I like the reward. It actually, for at least the first few levels, great value for your investment. If you can win even 2/3 of your game, then you're basically flying through and getting rubies for cheap. You're getting extra cards for cheap. You're getting fusion stones for cheap. Where it starts to get more expensive is after the fusion stones. Then you start paying 150 gold per match. If you win it, you get 20 back if you watch the advertisement. So 130 per match if you're lucky. And if you need to win 4 games to get from the fusion stones to the mythic pack, then if you win all 4, if you go 4-1, you come out ahead of the conversion rate in the shop for
Mhm.
rupees to gold, and you're making more on your investment. If you say the mythic pack is worth 80 rubies, 80 rubies is worth 900 gold or so. I forget the exact number. If you come out 4-1, then you spent less gold than it would have cost in the shop to turn gold into rubies, as if you're using that as your conversion rate. If you go 4-2, now all of a sudden you're spending more gold than those rubies are actually worth. If you go 4-3 or 4-4, then you're losing a lot of gold. It's fine if you play a ton and you want to use this as your investment. But if you are a free-to-play player, or if you're trying to really optimize your resource usage, then it's not the best use of your gold for sure.
I mean, in all honesty, I think you can hit a point in your library where just hitting additional mythic packs is really the only notable event, right? So you either hit 80 rubies and you buy another mythic pack, or you hit a mythic pack and Brawl. Those are really the only events that change the outlook for your library because your library is so far advanced. All of your commons are leveled up, and it's really just the rares and epics that need to get leveled up to 5 to improve your decks. We're certainly not there, you and I. And so I have found it easy to justify playing to the fusion stones every time. You get a classic pack with it. That's wonderful. You get an additional free card on top of that. you get 5 rubies, and then you get your 10 fusion stones. And that's been the predominant way in which I have upgraded my cards outside of buying noble books and buying cards that are particularly important when they're offered in the shop each day.
Buying cards in the shop is a great way to get targeted upgrades on your commons and rares.
But it's terribly
It, it
efficient.
it's
Like
it's
when you look at
terribly
it,
inefficient because you have no control over what comes up in the shop.
well, sure, but when you look at what a common costs you in terms of you buy a noble pack for 100 gold and you get, on average, what is it, 2.8 or whatever commons. So, you get a value for what a common costs right there. But the important thing to note there is it's a unspecific, a non-specific, just whatever common within the library. So it could be a rapid mousers, for example.
Exactly what I was going to say. You get a common, and a random common is worth much less than the common that you actually want.
Exactly.
So if it costs you 225 gold to buy out the shop on the commons that you actually want, yes, you are paying more than twice as much as a common cost per card from the noble book, but it's absolutely worth twice as much in order to get your gifted recruits leveled up a little faster, in order to get your witches leveled up a little faster.
Here. Yeah, the real trick of it is just understanding the game well enough to know which commons are actually worth buying out of the shop. I personally probably buy out of the shop maybe 2 or 3 times a month. You?
More than that, I would guess a couple of times a week on buying a card out of the shop.
Wow, really?
Yeah, there's always something decent.
Hmm.
I am a little less specific than you are. I don't just buy commons that can be used in my current deck. I also will buy things that go into a deck that I would like someday to have.
That's fair.
Not to be fair, not necessarily common. If I see a rare that I want, I will have to spend on that. That's 100% worth it.
Oh,
If I
fair.
see if I see an epic that I want, I will spend the 20 rubies on that. It's getting the epic that you want out of a mythic pack. A, getting a mythic pack is pretty rare, and B, getting a copy of the epic you want out of it is even more rare. So if you are targeting a specific epic, for example, Wild Saberpaws, fantastic neutral epic that can be used in a wide variety of decks, grab it from the shop whenever you see it if you have the resource.
Oh, for sure. I think the difference between what we've said is just that you're saying you buy it on a regular basis, even for cards that aren't necessarily critical right now, but for decks you might want to make. Whereas I'm saying only spend in the shop when it's a critical card that can justify the premium you're paying for getting that specific card right now. If it's not a deck I'm playing or intend to play this month, it's normally not a card I'm going to invest in right now. All right. Well, anyway, so having a great run through Brawl and getting to drop some fun, unhealthy hysteria turns was my week. What was your week?
My week was spent more on the latter. Early on in the month is actually my favorite time to play. You get a lot more variety in opponents. Later on in the month, in mid to high platinum, you tend to get a lot of higher level people that kind of took it off early in the month and are working their way up. But when I start earlier in the month, I get lower level players that regularly make it to Diamond because they're very good, but their card levels aren't quite as high. So it feels a little more even, and it
Hmm.
feels a little more test of skill as opposed to having to overcome a card disparity.
Okay.
So I have been messing around with a new Shadowfen deck that's a little more control value oriented than my normal Rush one. I put my Hairy Chestnuts back in because I love that card. It's great fun. I put in Hunter's Vengeance as another way to trigger the Hairy Chestnuts on top of the witches and the Toxic Sacrifice that's already in there,
Okay. Interesting.
as well as providing a little additional board clear, and I put in Harvester of Souls as a 5-drop, which works to create tokens in your deck. It creates a 7 strength at my level, a 7 strength copy of whatever it kills, and typically you want to use it on something a little cheaper. You want to use it to attack green prototypes or gifted recruits, where now all of a sudden you're going to have a 1 or 2 mana 7 strength unit. That's extremely powerful when you cycle back into that a little bit later on in the game.
Oh, for
I
sure.
managed to use it to beat a Swarm player where I got his Doppelbox. Thankfully, he put the Doppelbox in front of something that was 3 strength. So my 3 strength remnant killed the front part of the Doppelbox, and that left the second part wide open to be copied.
Oh, goodness. No.
It worked out all right.
It's interesting that you put Harvesters and Hunter's Vengeance. Why did you choose those particular 2 cards, out of curiosity?
An excellent segue. I chose those 2 cards because they were recently changed in the last patch on September 1st. The mana cost of Hunter's Vengeance was decreased at my level, and the mana cost of Harvester of Souls was decreased. They are both 2 cards that I enjoyed messing around with, but just didn't have the levels to really play them well. I got the last copy in my end of the month chest for Harvester of Souls that bumped it up to level 3.
Ooh.
So the strength went up and the mana cost went down when the patch hit, and that made me want to play with it a little bit.
So, if I'm a casual player of Stormbound and I would like to know what the latest patch information is, where would you recommend that I go?
I would recommend that you go to Stormbound Kitty at stormbound-kitty.com. They have a fantastic website. She has a fantastic website that has the latest news as well as the smoothest interface you will find on the World Wide Web.
It is a fantastic website, is it not? I mean, just like let's step aside for a minute from our podcast to just give the adequate, probably not even the earned or appropriate level of gratitude and homage to Kitty for creating this website. It is a fantastic resource for anyone interested in Stormbound.
It is a beautiful design. It is remarkably well executed, and it's an excellent resource.
And so while I'm there right now, I just happened to click on some of the latest news, which is there was an update on September 1st. 12 different cards were buffed. I'll read through them real quickly and then we can discuss a couple. Emerald Towers, Blade Storm, Flooding the Gates, Unhealthy Hysteria, Hunter's Vengeance, Crazy Bombers, Harvester of Souls, Terrific Slayers, Dangerous Suitors, that's just the neutrals. From there, Ironclad also saw Unstable Build and Fortification Tonic, and then Winter saw Underground Spring. Now, Sabaiku, if I just read those card names off and don't really pay attention to what the buffs are or anything, what comes to mind is these are all controlling tools, or almost all of them are controlling tools, right? We're talking AoE, we're talking slower, more value-oriented game cards. Am I wrong?
Exactly. You are 100% correct. We're talking board clears, and we're talking buff, and we're talking value generation. And it's great to see that these are the cards getting changed because the game lends itself to rewarding aggressive deck. That's been our strategy from day one. That's been our mindset that if we attack, we can overcome level disparities in the cards and in base health. That was only reinforced in Platinum and below when the Sheepyard patch decreased or capped the base levels. So now base health 17 instead of base health 19 really does reward you for playing a deck that goes all in on damage because you just don't have to do as much. It's easier.
You know, it's interesting you pointed that out. I wouldn't have thought about it in that way when they reduced the base health, but now that you mention it, I do see that as lending itself to incentivizing playing Rush, right? Well, it's like, well, before you would, your average base health you'd have to face in, let's say, Platinum was, I'm going to make up a number here. This is not necessarily indicative of anybody's experience, but let's say it was 18 and a half. And at 18 and a half, boy, you've got to find a lot of damage for 18 and a half. And now suddenly at platinum, it's 17. Well, that's a point and a half less. Suddenly your budget for rushers can be lower, which means your mana cost for rushers could be lower. So you could, say, drop Salty for line limbs, for example, or Salty for Warfront runners. You could speed your deck up and make it more rushy, just because on average, or not even on average, in actuality, you're never going to see higher than a 17 base health. So your deck just doesn't have to deal as much damage anymore. And so, yeah, now that you mention it, I do see that. It does incentivize rush.
So the fact that they are changing control tools means they recognize that there's an imbalance and they are trying to correct it. And is that enough? I don't know. It's still pretty early on, and I've been messing around with it, and it certainly seems to be effective. I don't know if it's quite as much as they wanted. I don't have access to a lot of data. My experience is anecdotal. So as we play out the rest of the month, we'll have to see, do you run into more control decks? Do they give you more problems than they used to?
Well,
is it worth trying to build and play one?
I will say that the unhealthy hysteria, I don't know if you want to call it a buff or a nerf or a burf, because while it does impact units of a higher health at each level, which I love, it also now costs 3 instead of 2. So, for example, playing it in Reckless Rush's deck, I'm not 100% sure that it's necessarily as good of a fit now at 3 mana as it used to be. However, playing it in the Brawl this past week, holy smokes, was it fantastic. It was a target-rich environment, right? We're talking a whole bunch of 6 and 7 health.
Definitely an optimal use case for the card. But I think even at 3 mana, because they increased the strength that it can target, you still get terrific value for your mana.
Oh, I'm not doubting the
I
value
think
for
it's still
sure.
worth it even in an aggressive deck.
Okay. Yeah, I will say that because the Brawl itself was specifically a buff to all the cards being played, it accentuated the let's call it a buff to Unhealthy Hysteria. If everyone was just playing rats because that's what the Brawl was, but there was no health benefit to it, it may not have appeared to be such a stronger card than it used to be. But now being able to target, for me, 7 health, and everybody's playing 7 zeros and 6 zeros, boy, it felt fantastic. I do think I'm going to try to fit it into my Shadowfen deck this month, just because of how strong a unit it can now target. It's worth at least testing and seeing if it's not a better include than, say, Faithless Prophets for me. I'm going to test it. I don't know if it's true or not.
I think that's reasonable. The advantage that you have playing Unhealthy Hysteria in a Shadowfen deck is that oftentimes playing against Shadowfen, people will not stagger their units because they're worried about witches, they're worried about toxic sacrifice, so they try to line them up in a way that really benefits Unhealthy Hysteria instead. So being able to run witches and Hysteria gives you a lot of flexibility as long as you can cycle into it and it's there when you need it.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. The appropriate way to play around witches is to play into Hysteria. I think that's fairly true. Unless you're talking, trying to put on columns 1 and 4 as, wide and far apart as possible, which is really not all that efficient of a way of trying to attack a deck. So I do think that I'll find some very nice, 2 units in a row kind of situations for Hysteria if I can cycle it correctly. So what other cards in here? You were mentioning you were playing a couple: Hunter's Vengeance and Harvester of Souls. Let's talk about those buffs.
So Hunter's Vengeance used to, at my level, cost 3 mana. Now it costs 2. At level 4 and 5, it always cost 2 mana. And I think that made it playable at higher levels. But at lower levels, doing less damage and requiring more mana just was not a reasonable compromise. So I'm glad to see that they lowered the mana cost. They made it flat the whole way through. And it deals more damage at levels 4 and 5. So it's just a stronger control tool. It targets multiple unit type, which is always interesting because it requires a little more thought than something like Blade Storm, which just hits all the units on the board.
But what do you think? Is it difficult, do you think, to find good boards for Hunter's Vengeance? Like in my mind,
Oh,
I'm just
absolutely not.
yeah.
If it hits 2 units, you're happy in
'Cause-
terms
'cause-
of value for mana. If it hits 2 units, then it's done great. If you're playing against a Swarm Rush deck, they have undead and satyrs. You just kill a couple of them. It's enough to make it worth including at that point.
But see, that's the thing I was getting at was no deck plays just undead and satyrs. All of them also play green prototypes and gifted recruits. So you're always kind of guaranteed, within a deck, not necessarily on the board, but your opponent's deck is always going to have 3, maybe 4 or more unit types. So it just feels like Hunter's Vengeance is not a big gamble.
Where it becomes a gamble is because it can target your own units also. So maybe you have to win a coin flip. Does it hit my opponent's gifted recruits or my gifted recruits? But you can oftentimes get around that simply by playing it as the first card you play that turn.
Good point.
And then playing the rest of your units from hand so they are not damaged by the AoE. And then, hey, look at that. Your units are stronger.
Right. Lest anyone forget, on your turn, your front is defined at the beginning of the turn. If at that point you play Hunter's Vengeance and destroy your own units, let's say you destroy all your own units, your front doesn't move. It stays exactly where it was. So you still have the luxury of playing all the rest of your cards wherever you feel like. It's not like on your opponent's turn, if your forwardmost unit gets destroyed, your front drops back. That won't happen on your own turn. So you can always play Hunter's Vengeance at the start of your turn, and then voila, you still have that front to play everything you want.
Now, the one card that I wanted to talk about that you barely mentioned is Terrific Slayer.
Oh,
which was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 strength is what it used to be at 4 mana and 2 movement. Now it's 4 mana, 2 movement, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 strength. It has an upside when it attacks into a dragon. It's Warfront Runners Plus. It has an upside, and if you never trigger that upside, it's just Warfront Runners. And Warfront Runners is a card that sees a lot of play.
so that's fair. And now that that's the case, I think, it's effectively a little bit of power creep, right? Like it's Warfront Runners Plus. And within that regards, yes, it should see play over Warfront Runners. If you have both at the same levels, you should always play Terrific Slayers over Warfront Runners, just because sometimes you might run into a dragon. However, in general, I really, really dislike hate cards. And so as Terrific Slayers was before, it was a penalty for taking that card versus Warfront Runners. And that penalty,
you paid a price for having a tech card in your deck. It was only useful in certain situations, and when those situations were triggered, it is exponentially better than a replacement level card, in this case, Warfront Runners and Neutral, that most people have a lot of copies of.
Yes, but what
But now you are not penalized for playing Terrific Slayers. Instead, it goes the other way. Now you are penalized for playing a dragon because more people are going to just run this card because it's there.
Correct.
There's
So
no penalty for running it, so more people are going to run it.
The problem I have with hate cards is that they tend to cause large tempo swings when played either direction, right? So in this case, it's not going to cause a bad tempo swing anymore because you could have played Warfront Runners and presumably your Warfront Runners are at the same level. So the fact that you played Terrific Slayers instead is irrelevant now. But the way it used to be is you would play your Terrific Slayers because, you need to cycle out of hand or whatever. And if your opponent didn't have a dragon on the board, it felt bad. And in fact, let's be honest, unless you're in a really unlucky patch, I'm going to say 60 to 70% of your opponents on any given day don't run dragons. And so for those 60 or 70% of opponents, it just feels bad playing it because it's a worse Warfront runner at the time. And it only becomes better when your opponent plays a specific card that this is meant to hate. So when you are playing a dragon deck and your opponent drops a Terrific Slayer, it feels even worse for you because you know that that guy has been sitting with this useless card in hand all day long playing and never finding, 70% of his games doesn't find a good target for this thing and it's just junk. But you happen to be one of the lucky dudes to draw the lottery and you're queued up into the one guy playing Terrific Slayers and he happens to be queued up against you, who happen to be playing dragons, and ergo, he's going to win that game because he derives immense value, because that's what the hate card is meant to do, is to punish people from playing cards that the game developers chose to print. If you chose to print dragons, don't punish me for playing dragons. Like, I don't know. I don't particularly care for these style of cards because they disincentivize people from wanting to play the cards that the game developers chose to make.
Right. All it does is punish you for building your deck in a way that you like. All it does is narrow the design space so that more people are playing the same cards and you get less variety, which makes the game feel stale. That's how every match ends up feeling the same.
Like, I understand that maybe the dragons got out of hand. Maybe the dragons were made to be too powerful. But I don't believe the solution to that is to print a card that either loses you games because it's not a strong enough card in 60-70% of your matches, and then blows away your opponent in the other 30 because that's how swingy of a card it is. And Terrific Slayers, not for nothing, is an incredibly swingy card.
Absolutely. It's definitely not my choice it is definitely not the way that I would have tried to solve this problem. And I will 100% throw out caveat that neither of us are game designers. We're just longtime game players, but we can both see the way that this goes is more people run Terrific Slayers, fewer people play dragons. Now every deck you play is going to be Green Prototypes at 1 and Gifted Recruits at 2 and Westwind Sailors at 3 and Terrific Slayers at 4, and that makes the games less interesting.
Right. If you were going to run Warfront runners, you should be running Terrific Slayers now, which means the percentage of people playing Terrific Slayers is going from 1% to, I don't know, take a guess, 20%. And that might be high, but whatever it is, it's going to go significantly higher. For the vast majority of us, we're not going to notice that difference. For the people who chose to play Dragon decks because that's what they like, and not for nothing, Paladin printed the dragon cards, those people are now going to have a
Sold
worse...
them for money. So now the money that you paid for those dragon cards, not exactly something you're getting back, even though they were indirectly nerfed by this change.
Right. It's just going to feel worse playing your favorite deck now. All the time, money, whatever you've invested in it is going to feel worse because every time you see a Warfront runners now, it's actually a Terrific Slayers, and it's going to punish you for choosing to play the cards you love. And I just don't like that. Look, Fel Flares is a perfect example of a good design. Yes, towers can be problematic. Units sometimes struggle to find the path to kill a tower. Fel Flares solves a lot of that. Sometimes it adds a bit of randomness and you're not sure if it's going to hit the tower or not. But that's a good card. It is useful with towers. It is useful without towers. It's just a good card overall. I think that design is very good. Beasts of Terror, I think, is a well-designed card. It doesn't hate against any specific faction. Yes, it is extremely useful against toad spam, but that's only because toad spam puts so many freaking toads on the board.
It's also very useful against Satyr-specific form decks, for example. It's good against anybody running a theme. It gives you a fighting chance when you are otherwise outclassed, and that's fine.
Right, but
It's at least designed in an interesting way and not a narrow way, like, for example, only targeting dragons.
Exactly, or only targeting constructs. Like, how bad of a deck or card would Beasts of Terrors be if on play it dealt, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 damage to all enemy constructs? Against so many decks, that's useless. And then against that one Ironclad dude you run into, you're just like, I finally got the key card to beat you. I've been playing...
Nothing but Ironclad is 50% of my matchups at least, and I would be thrilled with that card right now. Called Rust of Terror.
Okay, maybe a bad example, but you get my point. Against everybody else, you're playing with 11 cards, not 12.
And this is going back to our original point. With this change to Terrific Slayers, now you're back to playing with 12 cards, and also you have an advantage against dragons. And that's why it's inappropriate. There's no longer a penalty associated for playing this card at this mana cost. It's only upside. There's no negative.
Yeah, which
drawback.
Correct, which I don't like at all because, like we said, it's just going to mean that everyone should be playing this instead of Warfront, and that just penalizes the people playing dragons. Granted, there's a lot of people out there who are frustrated playing against dragon after dragon after dragon in, let's say gold or platinum. You don't see them so much in diamond, but there's definitely a section of the ladder where dragons are extremely meta, and for them this will feel great. But for all the people who play dragons because that's what they like, I mean, heaven forbid Brian Kibler ever joins.
Now dangerous suitors cost 6 out of 7, so the people who play dragons got a buff.
Yeah. Okay, so now that we have gotten through our news section, one of the sections that we want to introduce that we're going to try to do each week is called our Deck of the Week. We will share a link, again, from Stormbound Kitty, because it's the greatest website ever. We will share a link in our show notes that you'll be able to find, whenever you look at your show notes in Apple Podcast or wherever. And that will be a link to the deck build. This week, the deck submission comes from MK. It's a beautiful deck. It is a pure value ironclad deck that takes advantage of two of the buffs. The two buffs that it takes advantage of are that unstable build is buffed 1 strength across the board. So it used to be levels 1 through 5, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. It is now 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9, which is fantastic. And then Fortification Tonic, which used to cost 3, now costs 2 mana at every level, and still grants 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Similar to what we talked about with Hunter's Vengeance, there used to be a transition point for the mana cost from 3 to 2, now 2 across the board.
So actually at level 5, it buffs even more than it used to. Actually at level 4 and 5, it buffs more than it used to, which is pretty phenomenal. So MK's deck, just to read through it real quickly, is your green Protos, Summon the Militia, Destructo Bots, Dr. Mia, Fortification Tonic, Gifted Recruits, Ozone Purifiers, Unstable Build, Link Golems, Upgrade Portal, Finite Loopers, and lastly, Debug Loggers. You'll notice if you get to look at it or if you're paying very close attention, I didn't mention a single runner. There's no runners in this deck. It is a pure value play designed to just buff the absolute snot out of your units to the point where there's too many of them, they're too big, and your opponent simply has to concede because of the sheer value on the board.
This deck really takes advantage of the Ironclad buff mechanic, which is specific to units that are surrounding other units. So Link Golems, Debug Loggers, Upgrade Point, it's all of these buffs are specific to other units in its geography, and some of it specific to constructs only. That makes the deck fun to play, and it makes the deck fun to play against because you can try to line up your unit in such a way that your opponent can't take advantage of the proximity buff.
Yeah, not for nothing. If you're playing against Ironclad and your opponent opens with a construct, let's say, Destructo Bots, you should highly consider, if you have, let's say, Saberpaw's Green Protos or Saberpaw's Gifted Recruits, you should highly consider setting both of those units up so that they either, if your levels are good enough, clear the Destructo Bots, but if they don't, setting them up so that one will be on either side of the Destructo at the start of their next turn, which means the only place they could put the linked golems would be right behind the Destructo. And when that happens, the linked golems don't get to clear either of your units.
So you get to clear and they don't get to advance the front, and that's really the only way that you can outrush this kind of deck.
Right. The clear winning opener for Ironclad in those style decks is they open with a construct, and then on 2 they play linked golems to one side of the construct or the other, such that the linked golems buffs both sides and attacks a unit. So you get just insane value. You clear off, you play defensively or potentially offensively. If there's no unit to clear, the linked golems simply step forward, which moves your front. Those kinds of openers are so good for the Ironclad player. They allow them to snowball. But if you can bookend that original construct such that on their second turn they can't play the linked golems, or they can only play it behind where it doesn't trade and doesn't move, you are in very good shape. So just a little pro tip there for a fun way of trying to prevent the early snowball when playing against Ironclad. This deck would probably love to have that kind of an opener. Just looking at it, it is an extraordinarily fast deck. There are 2 cards that cost more than 3: the Finite Loopers and the Debug Loggers. Everything else is 3 or less, and holy smokes, it's fire.
And that's the point that I was going to make about this deck. It is fast. It is going to play 3 or 4 cards a turn very early on in the game. And your ability to clear everything is going to be very limited. And if this deck will punish you for not clearing everything.
Oh, for sure. Anything that stays up is a buff target, effectively, right?
Anything that stays up is going to get out of control very quick.
Yeah. I like this deck.
I would love to play this deck. If I had Dr. Mia, I would be running it right now.
I am actually thinking about, so I'm 1 Mia short of level 3, and that's a critical point for Mia because she goes from bordering to surrounding. So
I'm 1 Mia short of level 1, but someday I'll get there.
So I might actually spend the Fusion Stones to upgrade Mia to 3 and try this deck out this week just to see how I feel about it, because this looks like a ton of fun. I'm nervous about playing a deck that runs no runners, but if I was ever going to, this is the kind of deck I would try to play. So
now, I would like to point out this is a little bit of an expensive deck. Dr. Mia is the only legendary, but Debug Loggers, Upgrade Point, Link Golems are all purple. Fortification Tonic, Destructobots are both rares and are really pretty critical for this deck. Like we talked about earlier, if your Destructobots on your opening turn do not stick, you can't snowball, and if you can't snowball, your chances of winning the game are greatly diminished.
Yeah, one of the things that I have found out playing these style decks is that when trying to get value out of something like Link Golems, if I don't have a unit on the board, I need to play a unit that's going to win a trade and stick on the board, right? So like there's where I run into a pretty big problem. You know, my opponent has cleared my board, is pushing their front onto my doorstep. So now any unit I play first is going to trade into something and, you know, not stick around. Well, not for nothing. That first unit, like let's say it's Destructo, if my Destructo can't clear a unit and be on board, then the linked golems afterwards is 3 mana 2 strength, which is god awful. It's just abysmal bad.
And what you're really looking for in this deck is really being able to play multiple units a turn to try to reduce the probability of that happening.
Very true. Very true. And not for nothing, you should be able to. I mean, if you can't play 3 units on turn 6, something's wrong.
You can often play 2 units on your opening turn with 3 mana.
Sure.
If you're lucky, maybe you open instead on 4 mana with green prototypes into Link Golems and just start winning right off the bat.
Sure. Also remember to play your Destructo bots first if you have the choice. So next question. This is now Sheepyard's second patch since taking over the game. The first one was in July, late July. So it's been about 6-ish weeks between the two. How do you feel? How is this working? Like the last one, if you recall, they changed the economy, they changed the quests and rewards, and they also changed some of the cards. They nerfed some winter cards.
A lot of the elders and a lot of the mana gain, although the change to Gift of the Wise was later slightly reverted. The mana cost was still increased, but the amount of mana you gain was adjusted to make up for that.
Making Aaron even better.
I think that was wholly appropriate, though.
Fair enough. But in general,
the frequency of the update is encouraging. I think I interpret this as they inherited a game that had been stagnant for a little while. They are not afraid to make changes and collect data and see what happens from that. I think that's the right approach. It means that they're not going into it thinking this is what we need to do. They're going into it with let's try this, let's try that. All of the changes they're making are relatively small, with the exception of killing Winterpack.
Murdering. All right, well, let me ask you this. We often, and we've done a very good job, by the way, pat on your back, pat on my back, for not talking about Hearthstone too much this episode. But I'm going to bring in a Hearthstone metaphor here. There was this fabled, let's dream of meta called the control meta. where suddenly everybody would be playing all these skill-intensive decks, and whoever won would always win, not because of luck, but because they outplayed their opponent in these control versus control games. Anytime I played a control v control matchup in THL, I can tell you they went over an hour for a best of 5. They'd be like an hour and a half long. Just tedious grinds of matches. They were certainly fun. But have you been playing Stormbound thinking these games are too fast? I wish the meta was more controlling.
I have not, and I will admit up front that I prefer to play more aggressive, more rush, more tempo-oriented deck. I think that if the game goes on past the 9 mana turn, it's probably gone on too long, and that's my bias going into this. But no, I like the fact that the games are pretty short. I can wrap up a game in 3 to 5 minutes and be satisfied with it, win or lose, as opposed to, all right, I'm going to have to buckle down and try to make my way through this 20-minute grind.
I mean,
That's not what I'm looking for out of a mobile game.
I recall Control Priest v Control Priest matchups taking 20 to 25 minutes on ladder. Like that was an experience I really had playing Hearthstone. Like almost half-hour long games.
Multiple times.
Oh,
Multiple times.
I mean, but
It killed your whole night. You would try to get up a rank. You would try to gain 4 or 5 stars, and that whole process would take like 6 hours not because your win rate was bad. You could win every game you played. It's just every game took 45 minutes.
that being said, I would love to be able to play a more controlling style. So that one of the differences between you and I in terms of our favorite play styles, I was always a bit more of a greedy control style player. Certainly in deck crafting, I've always been a bit too greedy in building my decks. And I would say that you tend to be a little bit more tempo focused. And so for me, I'm a little excited to see how these cards come about. The problem that I have is I feel like a lot of these cards are cards that benefit more from levels. So they're making cards stronger that will impact disproportionately the people who already have these cards at an extremely high level. Now, maybe I'm misreading some of it. For example, maybe Hysteria is actually not bad for a level 2 or level 3 Hysteria owner now. Because, I mean, after all, it does 5 or 6 damage. Or, well, it impacts a 5 or 6 health unit. So maybe I'm not giving credit where credit is due, and these buffs are in fact useful at lower levels. But I just feel like a lot of them.
I think it's a case by case sort of thing.
Hmm.
So unhealthy hysteria now at that card level will impact most of the common cards that you see from your opponent.
Yeah, I think
In
that's
theory,
true.
if you have hysteria at level 2, you're probably playing in gold, and most of your cards are level 2. If you are playing in diamond and hysteria is level 2, you probably shouldn't be running even after these changes.
Fair enough.
But you definitely weren't running it before, so it's not a big deal for you to not include it now. On the other hand, something like the change to Bladestorm, I look at that and I do get worried as somebody who regularly faces decks with all level 5 cards. My level 4 green prototypes, my 4 strength wild saber paws, these are now units that would have survived Bladestorm before and will not now, so the board clear has become much more effective, and that really could influence my win-loss rate against control deck. They were using it before as damage reduction. Now it's actually an effective board.
I mean, so
And it's entirely driven by the level disparity.
right. So if I get rid of the level disparity, Bladestorm now at level 5 deals 4 damage.
And if I have all level 5 units, they're all 5 strength, so it's fine.
Right, exactly. That's what I was going to say. So they clear off all but 1 health from green protos, from gifted recruits. Your Westwind sailors survive with 2 health, I believe. Your lawless herds. There's a lot of things still maintain a decent amount. The problem is by buffing it this way, it increases level disparity issues. It doesn't necessarily mean that like Bladestorm itself has become so much more powerful against units at the same level, but level disparities have been exacerbated by this.
I agree with that. And it's just a little bit tougher to punch up.
And you know what? Time will tell whether or not it's really that big of a problem. Certainly, my Saber Paws, my Green Protos, my Gifted Recruits. There's a lot of in the in my version of Reckless's deck, barely anything survives. Neither of my Doppelbox survive. Like everything's dead.
Sometimes you get lucky and your opponent has a level 3 Bladestorm instead.
I'm probably winning that game anyway. But yes, I agree. It does happen. In general, I feel like Emerald Towers being buffed is a meh. I feel like Harvester of Souls will increase play rate for the card, which is great. Underground Springs, again, I think I don't want to call it underwhelming, but it's certainly not overwhelming. It's really the AoEs, and I include Hysteria in that because it is technically an AoE. It can be used to clear 2 units. So I'm talking, Bladestorm, Unhealthy Hysteria, Hunter's Vengeance, even Crazy Bombers feels more powerful now because it can happen earlier. Yes, it doesn't deal as much damage, but it still deals more than enough damage to be impactful, especially when it can be played a turn earlier. So to me, a lot of the control tools, the AoE style control tools in the game have been buffed. I don't know if it's enough to actually see the fabled control meta, but if it does, I'll start playing around with it. I'll give it a shot before I say, oh, this is terrible. I'd at least like to try playing some control style decks at, mostly level 3s and 4s and see what happens.
Yeah, I do like the fact that they were small changes. They boost the AoEs, but not make everything crazy. It's not like Crazy Bombers now costs 4 mana and does the same amount of damage.
Right.
It's just a minor change to make it a little more viable so it doesn't get out of control, which is a good way to approach it and an encouraging way when you're a player looking on the outside looking in. You see this sort of minor change as an incentive to try it, but not as oh gosh, I have to do it. These cards I never leveled up. Now I have to level them up.
Right. All right, and with that, I think we're about ready to wrap episode 2 up. This has been fantastic. I am so excited. On a side note, I'm incredibly appreciative of Sheepyard for giving us all this extra content to talk about this week. This has been awesome. I think that everyone who's starting to subscribe to the podcast, thank you so much. We will continue to try to give you a weekly podcast. So look for episode number 3 coming next week, give or take around Wednesday-ish. Subaiku, if anyone wants to ask us any questions or give us any comments, where should they go?
Right now, you can email us at broodsages@gmail.com. We'd be happy to take your questions there. You can always find Freeloader on the official Stormbound Discord or on Twitter at FreeloaderSB.
I would point out that you are also in the official Discord. You're just not as active as I am. But that's about it for us for this week. We'd like to say thank you very much. And please, if you haven't subscribed yet, go ahead and subscribe. We'll try to keep this to be about a 45 to 50 minute show each week. And if you can find time during your week to listen to that, we would greatly appreciate it. Any and all comments, please push it forward. And for Subaiku, I am Freeloader. And we'd like to say thank you very much and have a good one, guys.